Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez and this is From the South, the daily news brief on Telesur English. We begin this new edition right now. We begin in Turkey, where the Organization of Islamic Corporation has declared East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine, rejecting the U.S. stance as dangerous. Attending an emergency summit called by the OIC, 57 Muslim leaders called on the world to recognize the Palestinian state with East Jerusalem at its capital. Addressing the meeting, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan described Washington's decision as a reward for Israelis' terror acts.
Israel, which is guilty of occupation, blockade, illegal settlements, destruction of houses, displacement, seizing land and property, disproportionate violence and murder, was rewarded for all the terror acts it committed with this decision. I invite all the countries backing international law and fairness to recognize Jerusalem as the occupied land of Palestine. We cannot be late anymore.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas told the Muslim leaders that the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital was a crime which showed that Washington should no longer play a role in Middle East peace talks.
U.S. President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and the decision in order to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem is a clear breach of international laws and signed agreements. With this, the United States has lost its capability to be a mediator and won't have a role in the political process. We will not accept anymore for it to have a role in the political process. It is biased to Israel. This is our stance, and we wish you support us in it.
The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is attending the OIC meeting on behalf of the 120 member states of the non-aligned movement. He joined those who are recognizing East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine and reaffirmed the movement's support for the state of Palestine and its people.
The non-aligned movement reaffirms its historical support and solidarity with the just fight of the Palestinian people, as well as its firm commitment to continue supporting its heroic people in its quest to achieve its inalienable rights and its legitimate national aspirations, including its right to self-determination, freedom and independence in the state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, which is vital for the establishment of a just, integral and sustainable peace.
And in Palestine, protests and police repression continue to escalate after the controversial decision by the U.S. President. We have more in this report from Telesur's Sergio Rodrigo in Hebron.
Hello everyone. We are here in Hebron during this general strike being held by the people of Palestine, which has been declared throughout the whole territory and has been marked by strong repression from the occupation forces that are deployed mainly in this city. They have sent several military and police members and occupation forces from nearby colonies and have come to Hebron, one of the most populated cities of Palestine, and have strongly repressed protesters using tear gas and also bombs that have caused protesters to move to other areas of the city, but the protests continue. The decision by Trump to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem continues to cause indignation amongst Palestinians, who continue to claim their self-determination and peace.
That was Sergio Rodrigo from Palestine. Now, the Palestinian community in Panama and local demonstrators also took to the streets to protest against President Donald Trump's decision. They are demanding Panama's government reject this decision.
We reaffirm our solidarity with the Palestinian people. They are oppressed by President Donald Trump, who has handed land to Israel that doesn't belong to it. It surprises me how someone can give away land that is not his.
We are demanding Panama's government to take a stand against the United States declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Panama has to support the decision of other countries that have opposed to this decision.
We are asking Panama's government to stop being afraid of the United States. Panama has been the only government in Latin America not to take a stand on this matter because of the Israeli lobby present in the country.
The French President Emmanuel Macron, speaking at the One Planet Summit held outside Paris, has issued a stark warning to the world leaders against global warming.
We are losing the battle. Make no mistake about it. We are having a very good time. Everything is great because we're together. A lot of people like each other or are learning about one another. And it can seem like a really good time. But we are losing the battle. Those who came before us had an advantage. They could say, we didn't know, and it was true. But for the last 20 years or so, we've known. And we're finding out a little more every time.
Leading the One Planet Summit, Macron urged the world leaders and entrepreneurs to focus on practical ways to continue meeting climate goals and to encourage private investors to fund the requirements of the COP21 agreement. Towards the end, the summit did secure some commitments from private companies who pledged to fund climate-related projects for the coming years, like the Bill Gates Foundation, AXA, and the Hewlett Foundation, among others. Now, many environmental campaigners are skeptical about those promises by businesses. For a Caribbean perspective on the outcome of this climate summit in Paris, we are joined by Margaret Verdes, who is the director of Papa Boys Conservation in Trinidad and Tobago, and he's currently in Portugal. Thank you, Mark, for your time. How can you tell us about the outcome of this summit? Will it be enough to help Caribbean countries that are mostly affected by climate change?
Hi, Cara. Thank you for having this important topic on the show. As you know, the Caribbean this year in 2017, we got hit tremendously by two of the worst hurricanes, the most costly hurricanes that the world has ever known. The Caribbean lost about $150 billion in infrastructure in hurricanes Irma and Maria. This summit in Paris, it is essential for our climate survival. It really is essential for the survival of our small islands that have so little resilience. We are not wealthy societies. We did not cause this climate emergency to start with, and we really need the help of the world to stop anthropogenic climate change.
What should be the reaction of the Caribbean countries based on their needs after this decision that was reached in the climate change summit?
Well, the reaction what is needed in the Caribbean is we are small islands. You take an island like Dominica that was hit tremendously hard recently. Basically all the infrastructure was wiped out. They lost about 3 years worth of GDP this year in these storms. It's unimaginable. In the Caribbean, we are small nations. We are quite often fragmented nations. We do not always coordinate well together. That is something that has to change. This is a global threat, and we have to tackle it globally, but we also have to tackle it regionally. To this end, something good came out of this summit, where Richard Branson, he just announced a new cooperation together with CARICOM, the regional governance body in the Caribbean, to do exactly this. Some money is being freed up. This is the way forward for us.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your report. We'll sure to come back on more news on the Caribbean. And we will come back with more news in a minute. Stay with us. A people's summit against the World Trade Organization is coming to an end in Argentina. It is part of a week of global action held to protest against the free trade policies being promoted at WTO ministerial meeting in Buenos Aires. More details in the next report.
Rejection of the World Trade Organization summit was expressed by the social movements, which met to debate alternatives that could bring dignity to those suffering from the current neoliberal policies.
Workers along with social movements called for this People's Summit, which reflects the vision that social organizations and the people have when it comes to the consequences of these new decisions that corporations will take during this World Trade Organization meeting.
We think the numbers are very important in terms of workers' rights and how social movements are mobilizing to denounce what these agreements could mean for our people.
Social organizations, human rights groups, academics, students, indigenous people, and guests from all over the world have been taking part in the People's Summit, where a proposal was drawn under the title "Argentina is better off without a trade agreement."
It's about breaking with the idea they have of just one kind of integration in the world. We're trying to put an end to all that view, which is fed by the big media groups. We want an integration that is based on having our own technological and industrial development, where we are able to talk about a chain of Latin American integration.
In opposition to the World Trade Organization summit and its free trade agreements, after a week of debates and global actions, the social movements held a closing march through the streets of Buenos Aires, marching for rights and for life.
People are saying enough of this capitalism that starves people, this killer capitalism, which also causes war and kills so many. People want to build a different model, a model that values life.
It's very important to be able to express the discontent of our people against the policies of governments and organizations like the WTO, which through free trade affect the lives of workers and people and create more inequality.
These mobilizations had the government of Mauricio Macri worried. It militarized the city's streets and deported over 60 activists from other countries because of the questioning of his neoliberal policies. He knows the eyes of the world are set on Argentina and that the summit of the World Trade Organization will be a pointer towards the meeting of the G20 that will take place in Buenos Aires next year.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more on this last day of the 11th World Trade Organization ministerial meeting.
The World Trade Organization ministerial meeting has come to an end after many controversies, especially provoked by the position of the United States against the emerging countries and towards the trade measures proposed by China. Regarding this aspect, analysts say the meeting wasn't very successful. Meanwhile, the streets of Buenos Aires were completely militarized, like never before, filled with federal forces that yesterday repressed a group of demonstrators that demanded the organization takes into account the situation of the commercial sectors that don't have a seat at the meeting or the possibility to lobby for their businesses. There are a lot of expectations regarding the final document. The World Trade Organization is going to present this as the meeting comes to an end, although experts say there will be no new announcements. During these days, Argentina had to face a lot of criticism after censoring and deporting activists who came to the country to present an alternative to what was being proposed at the ministerial meeting. This means the meeting has not ended in a positive light.
That was Edgardo Esteban from Argentina. Now, millions of Chilean voters will go to the polls on December 17th to choose between the right-wing former President Sebastián Piñera and center-left Alejandro Guillier for the second round of the presidential elections. Former President Piñera came out on top in the first round with 37% of the votes. However, according to new polls, left-wing voters supporting Alejandro Guillier on the second round will turn this election into a close competition. Former presidential candidate Beatriz Sanchez has talked exclusively with Telesur and said that Sebastián Piñera represents a setback for Chile.
We believe that Sebastián Piñera is a setback for the country because he represents the Chilean right-wing conglomerate. He represents large economic groups. We came out of a government that was looking to make structural reforms and try to close a huge inequality gap that Chile has. Sebastián Piñera said that he wants to stop these reforms.
Our correspondent Paola Dragnic has more details on the last days of the campaign in Chile.
Both the presidential candidates have reached their last day of campaign. Sebastián Pinera and Alejandro Guillier prepared their closing rallies to be held on Thursday. Tomorrow, during the afternoon, Sebastián Pinera is closing his campaign at Copulican Theatre, and Alejandro Guillier will do it just in front of Palacio de la Moneda, with the presence of former Uruguay's president José Pepe Mujica. These last days of the campaign will be very intense as the candidates prepare to face the final results of this coming Sunday. Friday and Saturday, Pinera and Guillier are not allowed to campaign or deliver any political propaganda. On Sunday, the voting centers will be open from 8 in the morning and are expected to receive almost 14 million voters that will choose the next president of the country.
That was Paola Dragnic from Chile. Now in Mexico, over 7 million pilgrims are attending the ceremonies at the Basilica of the Virgin of Guadalupe. A band of migrant mothers are praying for a miracle to find their lost children. Our correspondent Pablo Perez takes us to the caravan to find out more.
So the movement of migrant mothers is here in Mexico. They will be taking a caravan all over the country for over 4,000 kilometers in different states looking for their sons, migrants that got lost or disappeared on their way to the Mexican-US border. This is a very special problematic because, as we know, there are over 30,000 disappearances in Mexico over the last 10 years, and the number could go up to 60,000 because of the non-denounced cases. But in the case of migrants, we don't have any clue because as their entrance to the country is not registered and their disappearances are not denounced, it goes in a gray area, and it's impossible to determine how many of them got lost on the way, which is something that the movement for Mesoamerican migrants, it's working for the Mexican law for the Mexican authorities to enforce, to somehow get some control, because they are not illegal here in Mexico. They are just transiting on the way to the border. This is the information here from Mexico. We go back to you.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico City. Now, the Brazilian president, Michel Temer, has met with 150 businessmen to discuss and promote the passing of his pension reform law, which has sparked multiple protests across the country. At the same time, trade union and campesino movement representatives marched outside the lower house to reject this reform. They threatened to paralyze the country if the government pushes ahead with this law.
At this very moment, the decision of the Labor Union Party and other opposition parties is that there will be no voting in this chamber. There will be total obstruction until the president announces that the pension reform law has been withdrawn.
It is an extreme decision, but it's necessary to get the attention of the executive and legislative powers and also the society of our country, so they don't carry on with this pension reform, because it goes against our constitution and people's rights, especially for campesino women.
Over 100,000 Peruvians are unemployed because Odebrecht projects are being stalled. According to the Civil Workers Union, that number will double if the Peruvian construction companies that are also accused of corruption intervene.
There is only enough money for a single quick meal. Alberto has been unemployed for almost a year since the construction project where he was working was intervened because Odebrecht was the company in charge. Odebrecht was accused of corruption for bribing several Peruvian authorities.
It doesn't matter if businessmen steal. If they are in jail, they will always have money. Meanwhile, us, the people who live out of their salaries and don't have a steady job, how are we going to live? We're trying to survive selling candies or anything that we can.
This is the situation for 100,000 workers, and this number could rise to at least 200,000 in the case of a possible intervention by the Peruvian construction companies Graña and Montero. JJ Comet and the ICC-GCA are both accused of bribing former President Toledo to obtain state contracts together with Odebrecht.
Those projects are well handled. They shouldn't be stopped.
We don't have anything. Our children ask us for food. They are starving, and those responsible go to jail. But it is a golden jail.
Christmas is coming, and right now, many construction projects are being stalled. So now, we're just surviving.
Construction workers demand that the government and the legislative authorities take actions to make sure that the resources go first to pay the salaries of the workers, and also to avoid stalling construction work when they sanction the corrupt.
The chain of payments are broken because workers are not getting paid, so the contractors and the material providers don't get paid either. They are all forgotten.
Civil construction leaders also point out that the inability of Kaczynski's government to come up with big projects is also the cause of growing unemployment in the area.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Now we move to the United States, where Democrat Doug Jones has narrowly defeated Republican Roy Moore in Alabama's special Senate election. Jones, a former U.S. attorney, is the first Democrat to be elected in the United States Senate in Alabama in 25 years. However, up to late Tuesday night, his opponent Moore refused to concede the vote, hinting at a recount. And we now go live to our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Stosur. Hello, Jorge. Can you tell us any updates on Moore's decision not to recognize the win of his person that was running against him? And can you tell us what the importance for the Trump administration this would be?
Well, he has no chances for a vote recount because in order, the state of Alabama says that you need to have less than 1% of difference between the first and the second to do a recount, and the difference is about 3 times that amount. So it's almost impossible a recount. So in reality, most definitely the winner is Doug Jones. What that means a real earthquake for the Republican Party, because what we have the right-wing extremist called Stephen Bannon, that he was running and helping the campaign of Doug Jones, and is trying to push the Republican Party precisely to that type of wing. He received a big loss, and with that big loss also comes the big loss of Donald Trump and his policies. It's a big win for the Republican establishment because they recover, in a way, the mainstream, and it's a very important victory for the Democrats that now they see more chances for the 2018 elections, midterm elections. What is very interesting is that the vote has been absolutely precise and clear. The vote that brought Doug Jones to the winning line was mostly black women, mostly women living in the suburbs, and mostly more participation of Democrats and also Republicans, that they were voting against the policies that were represented by Roy Moore, that we're talking about racism, homophobia, we're talking about pedophilia. So all those quote-unquote values that he embraced and was endorsed by Trump received astounding rejection.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your report. That was Jorge Stosur, our correspondent from Washington. Now moving to Kenya, where supporters of the opposition leader Raila Odinga have suffered violence at the hands of the police. Odinga attended a wake where their family members demanded justice. More details in the next report.
Mourners came to collect the bodies of their family members and demanded justice. Some were hung and murdered because they were Luos. Others were victims of police shootings during the protests. Jeffrey Mutinda was 7 years old when he died on a balcony. Zacharias Bundi was a taxi driver who went to work at 5 a.m.
It was hijacked by the thugs.
Elvis Otieno died of a bullet, leaving his children and his wife, who is now asking for help. She has denounced the government that has looked the other way. George Owino went to work after Mass last Sunday when criminals against the opposition ended up cutting his head off. He was a widower and now leaves 2 children. His brother is thanking the opposition.
I appreciate them. May God give them grace, power, knowledge to continue to be with their people. That's all I can say for now.
The opposition leaders have organized this meeting to denounce the police brutality, and they've provided evidence. The government of Kenyatta and Kenya's ally nations have kept silent about the atrocities. This was Eric Ochieng. He died from a bullet in the forehead on November the 28th, during the forbidden demonstration of the opposition to reject the legitimacy of Uhuru Kenyatta on the day he took office. The families say that they have not received compensation from the government. For the opposition, led by Raila Odinga, who was at the meeting, those who died are the heroes of the revolution. The bullet found in young Jeffrey's body was a police bullet, and Odinga says that the government has to apologize.
We are saddened and shocked at the silence of our so-called friends of Kenya. Yet they have the impudence and audacity to come and advise us, forget and move on. We do not recognize the elections of 26th of October this year, and we will not be intimidated. The Kenyan problems will be resolved by Kenyan people. The will of the Kenyan people is not going to be stopped, it's unstoppable. Yes. We'll move and we'll do what is right for the people of Kenya.
Family members have received the support of the opposition, although, as in the case of young Jeffrey's mother, Mutinda, the only thing that can calm the pain may be that his death wasn't in vain. These are people who have lost their blood in the Kenya political conflict, and they say that they need to find a solution so that the country can stop bleeding.
Now let's take a look at our World News Roundup.
British Prime Minister Theresa May says that the final Brexit withdrawal agreement would be put to a vote in both houses of Parliament. May said that she expected the vote long before the EU's March 2019 deadline.
So to be clear, the final deal will be agreed before we leave, and Right Honourable and Honourable Members will get a vote on it. And as my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, has set out today, we will then bring forward a withdrawal agreement and implementation bill to give the withdrawal agreement domestic legal effect, which will be subject itself to full parliamentary scrutiny.
Greece's top court has cleared the way for the extradition to the United States of a Russian man also wanted in Moscow, suspected of having laundered billions of dollars in the digital currency Bitcoin. Alexander Vinnik is the alleged mastermind of a $4 billion Bitcoin laundering ring, but has denied the charges.
The Criminal Division of the Supreme Court rejected our appeal against the extradition of Vinnik to the United States. The reasoning behind the decision was not mentioned, just the fact that it was rejected.
At least 30 people were reportedly killed by Saudi-led coalition airstrikes on a rebel military police camp in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. According to an official witness, 90 others were killed, including some prisoners.
And we've come to the end of this daily news brief. This and many other stories, as you know it, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Sign of resistance to hatred and injustice, Bill Fletcher Jr. conducts a discussion and analysis space to reveal the social struggles of Black people on The Global Africa. Wednesday,